What is a paranormal experience you've had? Serious. My family has a cabin next to a lake in Vermont that we spend time at in the summer. One night, while sleeping in the upstairs bedroom, I hear what sounds like someone getting up to go to the bathroom. It was coming from right across the hallway outside my door, so I assumed it was my mom. Usual occurrence. Oddly enough, no lights went on and no bathroom noises. The sound of footsteps just stopped. A minute later, I had this odd feeling that someone was standing at the half-open door to my bedroom, watching me. This feeling went on for minutes until all of a sudden the feeling of someone standing by the door turned into the feeling of someone standing directly over the bed. For the next 5 minutes, I had the terrible feeling that someone/something was looming over me with their face mere inches from mine. The 5 minutes or so seemed to last forever. Suddenly, as soon as the feeling started, it abruptly ended. No retreating footsteps, no noise at all. Whatever it was just gone. The next morning, my family and I are eating breakfast at the table, and I still couldn't shake the feeling. Then my sister spoke up and asked, "Mom, what time was it that you got up to go to the bathroom last night?" I could hear you up and walking around from the downstairs bedroom. Confused, my mom said that she never got up last night. My brother laughed and said, "Mom, we all heard you." Then my dad piped up and said, "No, your mom never got up." I didn't either. That's when I shared my experience. Freaked everyone out. My sister and I shared a room when we were tweens, and we both swore that it was haunted. We'd hear strange sounds and see weird stuff out of the corner of our eye. There was also an oppressive feeling of something very wrong. Once the sun went down, my sister and I were way too old to be afraid of the dark, and we were fine with darkness anywhere else. Eventually, my sister refused to sleep in the room. Mom, of course, didn't think there was any possible way we had ghosts and thought this whole thing was ridiculous. Until we went to summer camp. We came gone to this story from our mom. We had been gone for a couple of nights. Our dad was working graveyard, so mom had the house to herself. She was getting ready for bed and heard laughter from our room. She heard it a few times before it struck her that we weren't there. Mom checked the room and the lights were on. Mom tried to convince herself that she was imagining things and turned the lights off. She heard the laughter again and she went to check again. The lights were on again. Mom instinctively just said, "You kids go to bed." And she didn't hear them anymore. After that, mom believed us, but we were still kind of stuck with the room. It was an old house that we had while we are saving up for a better place. My sister adopted a cat which helped for some reason. But it was months before the cat would go into our room without flipping out, like literally ears pinned back, growling, hissing, and bolting out of the room like a bullet. We eventually were able to move to a nice home, and even mom was too happy to leave. Back in college, I was an officer in a student org. Each week, after our allotted time and the student union was up, we'd head to an unlocked lecture hall to keep hanging out. This particular night, most everyone had left. There were just 4 of us remaining, sitting on top of the first row of desks, shooting the shit, making plans. It was sometime between 10:30 and 11 when we heard what sounded like scratching and tapping in the upper right hand corner of the hall. There was a door up there that was usually locked from the outside, so we figured it was someone on the other side, maybe trying to get in, whatever. Well, the sound didn't stop, it kept on, and it seemed to move along the back wall, and we all started to get this very strange feeling, like the air was being sucked out of the room. Gotta be our minds playing tricks on us, right? Or maybe a small animal got let in at some point, who knows? 2 of us decided to go up and check out that corner. We got about halfway up the stairs when the air in the room changed again. It's difficult for me to describe, especially since it was so long ago, but it sort of felt the way it does right before a storm, like there's static, and pressure and tension. We froze. I heard one of the two who'd stayed down at the front let out a yelp, and then the tension broke, and this wave of something crashed over us. It made my stomach twist and flip. We turned and ran down the stairs. The others had scrambled off the desks and had backed up to the door, and we all rushed out of it together, completely spooked. Once outside, they told us they'd seen streaks of light shooting out of the corner right before the wave hit. No clue what it could have been. Maybe some sort of electrical discharge, I don't know. But it's the closest thing I've had to an honest to goodness paranormal experience. Exactly the same like what happened to me a week ago. Me and my friend was dropping props from my car at campus parking lot. It was around 6 PM and the sun's getting low. I'm a Muslim, and I have to pray Maghrib, prayer at dawn, and I know campus mosque is closed on Sunday, so I have to pray in praying room at 3rd floor. Short story, I managed to enter the building. As soon as I'm on 3rd floor I feel like I'm on survival mode. I'm the only person on the building and it's completely quiet. I took off my sandals and turned the lights on so I can feel less freaky. It was fine until I'm at the praying room. I was praying with full focus and conscious. I hear the scratching sound near the room in trance. At first I thought it was just small insect from outside because I left the door and window open, but the scratching sound gets louder and moving around the wall. I tried to ignore the sound and staying positive. My mind could trick me after 3 minutes of trying to focus, I thought. The scratching sound went off for seconds, then came the clearest scratching, tapping, and footstep sound moving around the door. Sounds like something trying to close the door with full force. Then my phone rang with Kelpie Sax ringtone as horror soundtrack, tempting me to break my prayer and leave the crap out of the building. Finally, after I managed to finish my prayer, I called back, and turns out my friend already left the campus and said he left his e-money card in my car. This is the moment when I realized that I'm doomed because I'm the only person on the whole campus. The scratching sound still goes on, and I tried to stay calm, grabbed my sandals, and calmly walked to emergency stairs near the praying room. It feels weird when I'm at the 2nd floor. I couldn't hear anything but my own footsteps. Sorry for bad English, I always skipped English class. No one ever believes me when I tell this story, but whatever. Back when I was in HS, early 2000s, I went to Mexico with my ex and his family. We went 18 hours into Mexico to visit his sisters-in-laws. When we got there, it was a weird experience for me because I'm black and most people in their town had never seen anyone non-Mexican in their entire lives. To say strangers were interested would be an understatement. The 3rd night I was there, I awoke to a feeling I was being watched. I turned over and saw an old Mexican woman staring at me, but not in a malicious way, more like curious or amused like everyone else. At first I thought it was my ex's Mel, since we were staying at her house, so I called out to her in Spanish, but she didn't answer, and after a few moments, I realized I could see through her. Eventually she walked out the room and I tried to shake it off and go back to sleep, but I couldn't. The next morning I told my ex's sister what happened, and she says, "Oh, you saw her?" I'm like, pardon the fuck, and she goes on to tell me that, while she's never seen La Vija, her husband has a couple of times. And the last time he saw her, she almost led him to his death. She tells me that one night a few years ago, they were once again visiting his mother and staying in her house. In the middle of the night, her husband wakes up to the feeling he's being watched. He sees a woman that looks a lot like his mother standing in the doorway. He calls out to her, asking why she's awake at this hour, but she doesn't answer. Instead, she walks out of the room and eventually goes outside. Half asleep and in a trance, he follows, calling out to her again and again with no answer. His mother's house is located in the valley between two mountains, and is so isolated she still draws her water from a well in her front yard. So, my ex's Bill is following this woman thinking it's his mother, and eventually follows her outside. He runs after her and sees her jump directly into the well. Panicked, he begins to jump in thinking he is saving his mother from drowning. But the moment before he jumps in the well, he fully awakes and realizes there's no splash and the water at the bottom was completely still. If he would have jumped in, he would have drowned. They have no neighbors and everyone else in the house was asleep. No one would have heard him scream for help. Needless to say, I packed my shit and went home early. Fuck that. I've posted this before, but here you go. My brother and I were home alone one night watching TV. My mother was working a night shift and father was out. Father came home and pushed the door ajar and poked his head through to say hello. We both turn around and say hello back. Father closed door. 30 seconds after, another man opens the door to say hello. We both turn around and say hello back. Man closes door. We assume a friend of my father has come back to the house too. Anyway, about 5 minutes later I head into the kitchen where my father was making dinner or whatever, and I'm expecting to see his friend again. I see that he's alone making dinner and assumed his friend was upstairs in the bathroom. I ask my father who his friend is. My father looks at me and asks me what friend. I reply, the guy who came back with you. Dad looks at me thinking I'm some sort of weirdo. He says I came back home on my own. Biggest wallet I've ever experienced. My brother was freaked out to the maximum. Remembering the man's face, he was pale looking and bright white hair. When I was around 13 I started getting a bad feeling around our house. There were certain areas I refused to go into, and I was terrified to close my eyes at night. I was always a nervous child, but this went far beyond that. There are a few incidents of note, and I'm going to share them in the order I remember them in. I was having a Skype call in my room with a friend, and at some point I left the room with the video chat still on, facing a somewhat shiny section of my bed frame. When I came back my friend looked shaken. I asked him what had happened, and he explained that he'd seen a face pass by in the reflection while I was gone. We checked to see if there was any way to move the camera to where it showed his own face, and we couldn't find one. While looking for a game I'd lost, I went up into the bonus room of our house. For reference, this was a room above the garage, disconnected from the rest of the house, except through the narrow laundry room. I hated going up there. In most cases I refused because it gave me the most horrible feeling. Some of my friends said even just going into the laundry room made them uncomfortable. After searching for a few minutes I lost my nerve and went to head back down the stairs and get out of there. As I was heading down the stairs I froze, an icy feeling in my gut, and started to turn around. Before I could, I felt a distinct impression of hands on my back shoving me. I just barely caught the handrail before I went tumbling and ran out of there like a bat out of hell. After the previous incident, I decided to put a line of salt down in the laundry room. I figured it couldn't hurt, and it'd be a good test to see if anything was actually happening or if I was just spooking myself. I put the salt down, and the very next day the feeling of dread had already dulled throughout the house. I could relax, at least somewhat, and the stuff that had been happening stopped. Until I came home one day and the feeling was back worse than it had ever been. My parents had hired a cleaner who had swept up the laundry room. I was terrified of what might happen next, but couldn't bring myself to get that close to the source again. Not long after this, I started getting the same feeling I got from the bonus room in my own room. I could feel it coming distinctly from one corner of my room. I don't know how long it was there, but eventually I got used to it. I thought again that maybe I was just scaring myself. One night I laid down and closed my eyes, and after a little bit, as I was starting to drift off, my body tensed. I couldn't move or open my eyes as that feeling from the corner of my room got stronger and stronger. I felt a dip in the bed at my side, and for a moment nothing happened. I thought that maybe, if I pretended to be asleep, whatever it was would go away. And then suddenly the feeling of hands was back and around my throat. I couldn't breathe, but I also couldn't move. My lungs burned, tears were rolling down my face, and I could feel myself starting to pass out. And just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. I didn't move a muscle until I finally fell asleep. The next day, when I looked in the mirror, there was bruising all around the front and sides of my neck. I was grateful wearing collars was my thing, so that no one was suspicious about me wearing a thick one for a week until the bruises were gone. I threw salt absolutely everywhere in my room after that.